A very warm welcome to all the listeners for today's podcast. I am Ganeshan Ramanathan, a sports management professional who has created this platform for adding value to budding sports professionals to get the best insights from industry experts. In today's show, we have renowned fast bowling coach Ian Pont from England, who has a wealth of experience in guiding young fast bowlers throughout their cricketing career. Let us get straight into the interview and get the best learning outcomes from his inputs. So, Ian, you have a very long experience in professional cricket, internationally at the highest level to guide fast bowlers. Can you please share some insight into how difficult is it to handle these fast bowlers?
Okay, well, I think the thing is when you're coaching at international level, you're not looking necessarily to make a lot of changes to people on the technical side. And a lot of that does depend on whether the player themselves is receptive to change, and they may not be. So sometimes the international bowlers that you're working with are looking for a little bit of guidance. Perhaps you might have seen something that they could do a little better. They might lean on you because you might be an expert in teaching how to bowl a Yorker or a slower ball. Or they might just be someone that needs someone to bounce ideas off or to sit alongside and discuss tactics with. So that would be traditionally what you do at international level. If you're working one-to-one with a bowler, it's very different. For example, I was fortunate to work with Shoaib Akhtar. I had a couple of sessions with him, and he just wanted to know how he could bowl faster. And he'd already bowled the world's fastest delivery a couple of years previously, and he wanted to know, could he get quicker? So someone like that, who's a real speed merchant, is possibly going to be interested in chasing the pace a little bit more. When I worked with Dale Steyn, he was a young fast bowler at Essex. He'd only played 3 test matches. And I was with him for 6 weeks as bowling coach. He was part of our squad. And I was fortunate to be able to have a number of sessions with Dale over those 6 weeks, in which time we chatted through his ability to try to bowl a lot more accurately, because at that stage he wasn't the most controlled fast bowler. So we did a little bit more work on the technical part of how he could maintain his accuracy a little better by moving in straight lines rather than at angles. So I think it does depend on what you do with somebody in terms of the time you have. But I haven't come across someone who's particularly difficult to handle. I think most fast bowlers recognise that although you yourself might have not been a world-class fast bowler, but you are a world-class fast bowling coach, and they're quite two different things. So I haven't found bowlers that have a huge ego. I was fortunate also to work with the great Darren Gough, who was at that stage the England's leading one-day international wicket taker. And I'm very aware that players like that are quite opinionated, which is good. They have their own views on their game, which is good. But even then, people are still curious as to how you can help them. So that's kind of been my view on those fast bowlers. And I've never really had anybody that's come across as particularly difficult. They've all been pretty decent.
It is really interesting to know how you handle fast bowlers once they reach their professional career, Ian. So, my next question is, can you tell us how you approach guiding a fast bowler at the highest level on their mental aspect?
I think that's a really good question. In my experience, the difference sometimes between one skillful player and another skillful player is actually what's between their ears. In other words, their brain, their mindset, and more specifically, how they think about themselves, how they back themselves, and whether they can actually perform under pressure. We see this more in probably T20 than we do in test matches, because T20, the whole game's over in 3 hours roughly. Test match over 5 days, there are pockets where pressure is built, but pressure seems to come thick and fast in T20. So I think it depends on what format of the game players are playing in or what we're involved in. But I would, in terms of guiding a fast bowler, I would try to get to know them as a person. I'd like to go to dinner, chat to them, or catch them at breakfast. Maybe not in an official team environment, because sometimes a player will not speak out. They'll sit there and not say anything. And sometimes you create a nice little atmosphere that they can come to you and relax and ask questions. And also I like to just get into the head of the people I'm working with, so I really understand them as a coach. There would be a little point in me putting across my ideas if the player didn't buy into them or didn't want to hear them. So there has to be a two-way street. And I think that's probably the way that you get the best out of a fast bowler on the mental aspects of the game, is really just get to understand them, facilitate for them so they feel relaxed with you and they can trust you, because ultimately trust is the key to that.
As a coach, you not only train professional cricketers, but you also develop youth cricketers. So, can you tell us how you identify raw talent and what are the tick boxes important for you as a coach?
Another good question. I'm a technical skills coach. I mean, as a fast bowling coach, of course, I cover tactics and the physical aspect, the mental side of the game. But ultimately, if you're not skilled enough as a cricketer, you're not going to perform. So I look at technical skills. So my identification of young talent, it would be, how does the bowler actually bowl? You know, what are they doing to access their speed and control? What are their body movements like? Because I'm an expert in that field. I understand body movement very well, biomechanics, and how it applies to fast bowling. And through technical skills, you can tell whether someone has the ability to go all the way up the food chain effectively. Just because somebody's young and not skillful, it doesn't mean they're not going to be a great bowler. Some young bowlers learn much quicker than others, and I am mindful of that. So I try not to dismiss people just because they don't have the particular technical skills I'm seeking. I would try and interact a little bit with a young bowler if I hadn't seen them before, ask them some questions and see whether they took instruction well. I think particularly at the young end of the market, it's more show and tell. It's more instruction than it is observation and questioning, although that's hugely important. I think as a bowler gets older and knows their game, it's more probing into what they're doing. Young bowlers, I try to treat them as if they're a wannabe professional anyway, and I think that really helps. I treat them with respect. But in terms of what I look for in identifying talent, it would be a first port of call. An easy one is always speed. I measure their speed. I've got a rough idea what speeds they should be at certain ages if they're exceptional. And then we do video analysis, and I can have a look at that and see whether they're likely to be injured from having a bad position in the crease, or whether they can actually develop more speed by slightly tweaking some positions, and we get more out of their body. So those are the things that I sort of look for, rather than the obvious stuff. You know, someone is taking a lot of wickets and is massively accurate all the time. It's easy to identify them, but I'd rather bet on the horse before the race starts, not just bet on the winner after it's won. And I like to sometimes pick a little bit left field candidates, young bowlers, because there might be, and it's hard to describe this, but there might be something about them that really jumps out.
I'm sure that a lot of budding cricketers listening to this podcast would agree with what Ian is saying and would rather focus on the most important aspects which a coach looks for, that is the speed. So, my next question to you is, you have developed a certification program on fast bowling training. Can you please share what is this concept and how do you conduct it?
Yeah, I did some while ago want to share my understanding of fast bowling and the way I do it, which I called ABSAT, which is Applied Biomechanics Speed and Accuracy Training or Technique, ABSAT. And for a few years, I was doing certification in that, and I was running 1 and 2 day workshops, and coaches came to that who may have ECB accreditation already or not. But that didn't matter because I was teaching them a specific set of skills to teach fast bowling and to train people in the ways of developing speed, control, consistency. And that worked pretty well for a while. One of the reasons I stopped doing that was simply time, because I got involved in ICC World Cups and franchise T20 cricket as a head coach and bowling coach. So time sort of ran out on me. But I think it's something I would certainly like to resurrect and do again, because the coaching methods that I use, the ABSAC coaching methods I use, are an extra set of tools for any coach to use alongside their BCCI qualifications or ICC or ECB or whatever country they come from. This sits quite well alongside that and is a slightly different approach. And sometimes you need to have more than one set of tools to crack a problem open.
With the growing digitization in the sports industry, are you thinking of developing a digital course for fast bowling training for the coaches?
Again, it's something that could be done digitally. I'd have to look at how it works digitally, because I think ultimately you interact best when you're standing alongside somebody. That would be an obvious thing to say. One of the issues with the digital stuff is that I don't know whether the person at the other end is actually doing the coaching. So it could be someone else doing the coaching, and effectively they take credit for it if it was like a certification. But I think there are ways around that. I would definitely look at having it, given that the world is shrinking, but we've got obviously problems with COVID-19 right now and travel issues. But as soon as they clear, it would be good, in particular, to come to India, where I have a lot of time and hours invested, a lot of passion in that country. I've been coming since 2007, I think it is. And I love India. So that would be a great spot to do a coach education program. But digitally, it could be delivered. I think that would be true.
We all know that match preparation is a very important aspect for any sports person. So, what do you think a fast bowler should focus on before starting a match?
I think that depends what level you're playing at. If we're talking about international players or franchise cricketers, IPL players, they would have had team meetings about the opposition. And it's just understanding in your mind what you're doing, what your plans are, how you're going to deliver those plans. And I think it also applies down the line as well, like into club cricket or schools cricket, is you may not have video footage of the opposition, but you certainly should have some, and this is the important phrase, role clarity. I need to be clear in my mind. What's my job? I think that goes back to what you say to international players as well. What is your role in this? Are you a swing bowler, a seam bowler? Are you trying to take wickets early on? Are you trying to bowl dot balls? Are you trying to mix up the speed? Do you bowl in the middle overs? Do you bowl at the death? It really depends on what sort of bowler they are, whether they can use a new ball, whether they prefer a softer, older ball, what skills they have, and can you teach them more skills to make them better. Deepak Chahar being an absolutely classic case, worked with him in 2016 when he wasn't even in the Rajasthan team, let alone the IPL. And he wanted to be a new ball bowler up front in the power play, which is possibly the hardest job of all, with only two fielders out on the fence. And he really worked and understood what he needed to do over the week I was with him. And he's clearly gone on and become one of the best T20 bowlers in the world. Credit to him and credit to the coaches he has since worked with. But that clarity of mind, that thought process is vital, and it is something that he has got. So I would always say, what do you focus on before you start the game? Delivering your skills and making sure that the plan that you've got works. If it doesn't, have a plan B. And if that doesn't work, have a plan C. But always try plan A first. That's what I would say.
As the old saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I'm sure all budding cricketers would remember that key saying and focus on planning and executing their strengths. My seventh question is, how do you visualize nutrition as an important aspect for a fast bowler?
What we eat is important. I mean, particularly in the subcontinent where diets are very carbohydrate heavy, full of sugars. Sugar is 100% carbohydrate. I know that from a health point of view, there's lots of diabetes issues in the subcontinent, and food that is very heavily laden in carbohydrates like rice and breads and drinks that are heavily laden with sugar not good. I mean, just really not good. I think there has to be more of a balance. A performance athlete, which is what cricketers are and should be and always should be, are more like thoroughbred racehorses or more like Ferrari cars. You know, they need to be looked after properly. They need to be managed well. They need to have the right kind of training in the gym, not overtraining, but the right training. Don't want to be too big, nice and fit for purpose, powerful rather than big and strong, because muscles can make you strong, but not, can make you strong, but slow. So sometimes muscles are good, but they can actually slow you down, make you too bulky. So it's getting that balance right. But food wise, it's eating at the right times of the day. It's making sure we replenish lost electrolytes and ensuring we don't dehydrate, because that's another issue. I don't think people drink enough water or fluids, or they drink the wrong type of fluids, again, heavily laden with sugars. And I think that's possibly the most important thing. The nutrition part of sport, particularly in fast bowling, is a little undercooked. I mean, we need to probably elevate that. And this comes back to understanding of the player. We always look to a coach. Bowlers and batsmen always look to a coach to apportion blame. When things go well, we say well done on the player. When things go badly, we tend to blame the coach, which is an interesting way round. But as long as the coach is giving the right information, particularly on the nutrition side, are we eating properly, then I think it's okay. Players can then make informed decisions about what they put in their mouth.
We all know how tiring fast bowling can get, especially in test match cricket. So, my next question to you is, what is an adequate load for a youth level fast bowler? And how simply can we understand it?
Well, the ECB, English Cricket Board, came up with this 7-4-2, which was in a 7-day period. You shouldn't bowl more than for 4 days and not two of them back to back. Not more than two back to back. So you could bowl 1, 2 in a row, but not 3, kind of thing. That's kind of a broad brush view. Again, in my experience, particularly in the subcontinent, fast bowlers bowl way, way, way too much. Way too much. There is a balance here, because during the beginning of my own career, we bowled a huge amount. There were no bowling machines. There were no dog ball throws, no side arms, whatever the new names are, robo arms. There was none of that. So you were the bowling machine as a fast bowler. And as a young kid, you'd bowl for a couple of hours here and a couple of hours in the afternoon. But that was going back 40 years. I mean, it never did us harm. And what it helped with was for us to get bowling fit. So this is a big area, actually. This question is more than how many overs do you bowl. It's if you're not bowling the overs, are you going in the gym instead? Because you can't build a bowling action in the gym. I'm sorry, but you can't do that. You cannot build line and length in a gym. You can't build speed in a gym. None of those things you can build in a gym. Strength and conditioning coaching is great. It's valuable. It helps to keep players on the pitch for longer. But that isn't where you build a fast bowler. You build the fast bowler in the nets. You build him through training fast bowling, and you build him by understanding biomechanics of movement and rhythm and coordination timing. And all that happens is through a good coaching program, not through a good strength and conditioning program. And that's a mistake I think a lot of teams, coaches, boards, head coaches in particular, and franchises have fallen into that mistake. They appoint loads of S&C coaches. You see guys lifting heavy weights in the gym. Everyone says, oh, it's wonderful on social media. Actually, is that what's going to help you to be a great fast bowler? No. I understand you need to be strong to absorb the forces that go through the body, but here's my take on it. If you have a poor bowling action, you cannot outmuscle that. You cannot outmuscle a poor bowling action. You'll always break down. And these guys that have stress fractures and back injuries, yes, sometimes it comes from bowling far too much. There is that element to it. That's one of the indicators of being injured, is bowling far too much. but also poor bowling actions are the reason people get injured a lot. So in terms of an adequate load for a youth level fast bowler, it does depend what you're doing in the nets, because we can control it in a match. We can say you only bowl 6 overs in a game or 10 overs in a game, but the day before they might have bowled 30 overs in the nets. And it's just something called tapering. It's basically making it thinner, the load reduce as you get towards a game. If you're playing a series of games, you don't want to be going to those games tired and fatigued because you've over bowled. You want to be going to those games fresh, ready to go, space out the amount that you've bowled. One of the biggest issues I see with loading for young cricketers is they do very little, and suddenly before the season starts there's a huge spike, a really big spike in the amount of bowling they're doing, and they break down. They haven't built up to it. So as much as we have tapering at one end towards competition, we also have an increase in workload through our off season, so we don't suddenly spike just as the season hits and wonder why everyone's got a stress fracture or back injury or they can't bowl anymore. So it's actually a long answer to what looks like a simple question, but it's a very important question. And I would say that loading young fast bowlers is one of our biggest areas of concern.
Along with adequate loading, I have heard the concept of biomechanical correction. What is your concept on this issue?
Well, as I said before, if it doesn't matter how strong you are, it doesn't matter how fit you are, it doesn't matter what you eat, and it doesn't matter how brilliant you think you are, if you can't bowl, you can't bowl. And the bowling action is a determination normally of how well you can bowl. Example, if you have a Ferrari, we know that they're all built the same way. We understand they have good engines and wheels and brakes and tyres and steering, and everything on that car is great. If you start removing parts of that, you start putting in a different clutch system or a poor engine or the fuel isn't right, it's still a Ferrari on the outside, but it doesn't quite work as it should. So underneath the bonnet, underneath the hood, if you want to say it like that, your biomechanical movements are important. If you're out of sync or you're out of coordination or you have no rhythm or timing, doesn't matter anything else, it's not going to work for you particularly. You can get away with it. On certain games, it will suddenly click for you and you'll be good. And I'm sure there are a lot of Indian bowlers and overseas bowlers over time we can all think about who have had careers that are very, very up and down. But the top bowlers tend to perform consistently well all of the time. And what ends up happening is as they age, they fall away because obviously the age creeps up. Example being someone like Brett Lee. Very consistent in his whole career. And I remember him coming in early 2000s. People said, oh, this is a wild, young, fast bowler. I don't think Brett Lee was ever wild. Never saw that. And these are people who just don't really know what they're talking about. So I think if you have a good bowling action, a good biomechanical bowling action, then it will look after you because your technique is technique and your technique is your servant. And we know that in batting terms, we focus heavily on technique all the time. All about technique for batting. Well, it's the same for fast bowling. The problem is most fast bowling coaches do not teach technique. They don't understand the technique of how to bowl fast and they don't understand the technique of consistency. So therefore they don't teach it, they just teach you outcome. They'll just say pitch it up, hit the top of off stump, swing it away, don't bowl far too fast. Well, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. In a way, we're trying to focus on what the body does, like we do on batting. We don't say to a batsman, just hit the ball out the ground every ball. We talk about how they pick the bat up, move their feet, keep their head still, all technical things. Fast bowling, not so much. So I think that biomechanical correction is important. Slight tweaks, not big changes. No one likes to hear the word change. If you say to a batsman, I'm going to change your technique, he will not want to do that. If you say to a batsman, I'm going to help you to avoid being LBW every game, or you keep getting caught at slip, we need to tweak that, he'll do the work. So I think language is important, how you put it across. But biomechanical correction is important because, as I mentioned earlier about people with injury, you don't want guys getting injured all the time. And one of the biggest problems for injury is a poor bowling action. And I could almost predict when I see someone bowl how long they're going to last before they have a stress fracture, just because they get into some horrible bowling positions and really, really bad. And the stress is getting trapped in their back and they end up having stress fracture. So biomechanical correction, very important. You've got to know what you're doing.
My last question for you in today's podcast. What is the basic biomechanical point a fast bowler or a coach should focus on and rectify?
GPS system. If you have a good satellite navigation or GPS system, then you could say, I want to go from here to Mumbai, I want to go on this journey across the country, and it will set it for you. If you don't have a good GPS system, in other words, if you don't have a good biomechanics as a fast bowler, any road will get you there. It kind of doesn't matter how you bowl, you just get it down the other end and you might get lucky and get some wickets one day. But biomechanics is very important. So the basic biomechanical points are really, and there are 4 of them, and I identified them 20-something years ago as the 4 tent pegs. So that's back foot impact, front foot impact, release of the ball, and follow through. Those 4 key moments. As soon as your back foot touches the ground, as soon as your front foot touches the ground to bowl, all between the white lines. As soon as you let the cricket ball go, and then after that you chase the ball down and you follow through. Those are the 4 positions to focus on, because loads of fast bowling coaches talk about how important the run-up is. Yeah, not so much. It is, it isn't. You know, it's just your journey to work if you think about it. You know, what's important is your day's work, which is actually through the white lines. Your crease area is your office, and you go to work in the office. No one says, oh, what was your journey like to work today? Your boss doesn't want to know that. He wants to know, did you do your day's work? And then your follow through, the exit, is just when you leave the office. So the most important parts are tent peg 1, tent peg 2, tent peg 3, which is back foot, front foot, ball release. Follow through happens as a consequence. The run up, jump, yeah, they're important, but they're not as important as what you do in the crease. So I would say focus on the positions. They are pretty consistent and similar for all of us, or they should be. And the reason you can coach technique is that technique is common to all of us. When we talk about somebody, Jasprit Bumrah, bowling differently to Brett Lee, bowling differently to Norkia, bowling different to Ishant Sharma, or Varun Aaron, for example, they look different because that's their style. Like when Usain Bolt runs, he runs differently to you and I with his style, but he uses his arms and legs and does all the correct biomechanical movements. That's what makes him a great runner. And people like Jasprit Bumrah, if you actually look at their action, they're in similar positions to other bowlers. How they get into those positions is different, and that's what's called style. You can't teach style. Style is what you have. Technique you can teach, which is called structure. The structure of the human body is 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. We all share that. But although we all have a thumbprint, it's different. And this is where coaches get very confused. So the basic biomechanical points for me that a coach should focus on and rectify are these bowlers in the key positions to move in straight lines and to link up the bottom of the action, which is the feet, all the way through the body, through the hips, into the back and shoulders, and then into the arm and out through the wrist and ultimately the ball. Is that linked up like a rocket taking off, like a gearing system on a bike? Is it a series of muscles that stretch and contract like a javelin throw? Is it an elastic movement? Is it relaxed? You can teach those things because they are technical. What you can't teach is how someone does it, because that's their own style. And I think that's where the confusion.
Thank you, Ian, for your valuable insights on fast bowling and giving important tips on how young fast bowlers can improve on a daily basis by paying close attention to these small details and improve as a cricketer. I would now like to conclude this podcast by playing a song for all the listeners, which Ian himself sang. Until next time, stay safe and take care.
Can you feel it in your veins?